Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to Best of Publishers. Today we're going to take a look at Wizards of the Coast. Now, Wizards of the Coast is an interesting company to talk about. They're known for one game, of course, Magic the Gathering, but they've done many other games. But then in recent years, they were bought by Hasbro. So sometimes there's some confusion. Was a game from Wizards of the Coast? Is it from Hasbro? Is it from Avalon Hill, which was also bought by Hasbro? So there's a little bit of confusion, but I tried to be as focused as I could on this list. So these are my 10 favorite games from Wizards of the Coast. Now, Wizards of the Coast, like I said, is an interesting company. They're sometimes not so much fun to talk to and work with because it seems like they come out with a game, and if that game does not have magic numbers, then they stop making that game and stop doing it. So when I see a game come from them, I don't often get very excited because I'm pretty sure that it will not have many expansions and things for long, and that is almost always the case. But they have produced some great games. Here's my favorite 10. Number 10 is Dungeon Command. Now, Dungeon Command was a tactical combat game with miniatures from the Dungeons & Dragons universe, and I think there's either 4 or 5 sets released for this. They were painted miniatures. There was no dice in the combat. It was all card combat, so a very unique tactical game. Now, part of the reason this is on my list is because the miniatures also came with cards where they could be used in the Dungeons & Dragons board games like Castle Ravenloft, Legends of Drizzt, and things like that. So I really like that, especially since the miniatures were painted. So that probably brought this up slightly, but the actual game itself, Dungeon Command, was very good. Number 9 is Guillotine. Guillotine is a theme that, it's kind of not a theme that you want to be a fan of, right? Where people are all lined up for the guillotine and you are trying to chop off as many heads as you can to get points, and different people are going to be worth more points. So over the course of this game, you are playing cards and rearranging the people in line to get the people. So when it's your turn, the person in the front of the line is someone who's worth more points. It's a simple, silly, fun game, not as bloody as you might think. It's kind of in the background, although it is the theme of the game. But it's done really well for them. That's Guillotine. I think they still sell this one today. Number 8 is Filthy Rich. Filthy Rich is a fascinating idea for a game that no other game has ever done, where this game has a binder that comes with it, with the sleeves in it, where you put the cards in. And that's how you play the game. You are buying stores, and those stores have signs. And so you stick the signs in the cards. So bigger signs will take up a bigger section of the cards, and then you might flip pages, and then you roll die, and whatever number is rolled, that's the sign that's going to give that person money. And so it's kind of a fascinating thing. As you roll these dice, the bigger signs will get more money. If you put them in the front of the book, they will cover up other signs. But if you turn to the back of the book, those signs won't get anything. So it's not as good of a game as it could be. This game actually is from Richard Garfield from Magic the Gathering. There's some problems, there's taxes, and there's a lot of luck in the game, but it's a really cool idea, and it is fun, so that is Filthy Rich. Number 7 is Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers. Now, I'm pretty sure this would be much, much higher on the list if they ever did any more expansions, but they haven't done an expansion now for 8, 9, well, almost a year, I think, actually, and I think this game is dead on the vine, which is unfortunate because this was the successor to Heroescape. It took a lot of ideas from Heroescape, and you had your planeswalkers, and they were summoning creatures, and you're moving them around with different cards. The miniatures were not the greatest of quality, but it was still fun to see this system, and it needed expansions badly. They have 2, so there's a tiny bit of deck building, a little bit of army building, but not enough. But the game itself is still great. This really is a disappointing one for me. Number 6 is Conquest of Narath. Now, this is a Access and Allies, if you will, or a Risk game set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, which is, as you notice, a lot of the games here. And by the way, side note, Dungeons & Dragons is not on my list because I'm talking about tabletop games, so I'm not including role-playing games, so Dungeons & Dragons is great, but I'm talking about the Dungeons & Dragons board games. This one here, you have all these different creatures, they roll different dice, it's a lot of fun. It's simple, it's a great 2 versus 2 player game, good versus evil. You are forced to attack the other person very quickly, there's no like holding up and things. It's a great little game that a lot of people don't talk about, but if you ever see it, give it a try, Conquest of Narath. Number 5 is the BattleTech CCG, the BattleTech collectible card game. This game actually introduced me to the BattleTech universe. I went on to read the books, then go play the actual physical board game from Catalyst and FASA. But I like the collectible card game. It's still one of my favorite games. In this game, you have different mechs, And it has some similarities to Magic the Gathering, where you're using different resources to bring mechs out. You can attack your opponent. You can attack their discard pile. You can attack their draw pile. You can attack their mechs. You can attack their resources. Mechs had different speeds. Some mechs could block, were too slow to block. The artwork was fun. It was really great. And they released a couple expansions, fantastic. Then they stopped supporting it. And there was some cards that are obviously better than others. The metagame was not as strong as it is in Magic, but it still was a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. BattleTech collectible card game. Number 4 for me is Dungeons & Dragons Wrath of Ashardlan or Castle Ravenloft or any of these big board games. This was a cooperative game that is now being currently put out by WizKids in their line. But in this game, you have a bunch of heroes, and you're going through, and you level up at some point to level 2, and that's it. But you're going through, and different monsters show up, and you fight these monsters, and you're trying to get through this, whatever this dungeon is. It's fun. I don't look at it as much as a dungeon crawl as a pure cooperative game for people to work together, but it's so much fun, especially when you bring in those painted miniatures from the Dungeon Command and mix the sets together. There's just so many options. Still my collection. Number 3 is Robo Rally. Robo Rally was a game designed by Richard Garfield so that they would make, was his first game he designed. He designed Magic so that Wizards of the Coast would have enough money to produce Robo Rally. But Robo Rally, which was just reprinted by Hasbro, it has these little robots, and you're playing programming cards, moving the robots around, and trying to get them to different goals, but they're pushing each other. It's chaotic and logical at the same time. Super fun. The expansions make it even better if you can find them. Number 2 for me is Magic the Gathering. Now, Magic the Gathering is a game that I do not have in my collection, with the exception of I have a few Commander decks. Commander is my favorite way to play Magic the Gathering. That's where you have 100 cards. Every card has to be different. I like that. It's just simple fun. Lets you bring out big, giant creatures to fight each other. But basic Magic the Gathering is also fun. I don't have it in my collection because I don't need to keep collecting it. But they make dual decks, the starter decks that work very well to play other people. This is a game that you really can play casually, or you can get really involved with. The developers and designers of this game have worked really hard. It is still around after all these years. I mean, it is over 20 years old at this point and still going strong. Still a game that has kept many stores in business. And whether you don't like the metagame or you don't like how expensive cards are, or the rarity scheme, there's still a lot to like about the game. Highly recommend it, Magic the Gathering. And my favorite game from Wizards of the Coast is Lords of Waterdeep. Lords of Waterdeep, I first heard, a worker placement game set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, and I said, sure, I'm sure that will be a fantastic game. But you know what? It really was. Now, the expansion, the Scoundrels of Skullport, really elevates it to another level, but this game is just so simple. You are collecting different resources, which are like fighters and clerics and wizards and so on, and then you will spend those to go on missions, build buildings that other people can come to and give you things. There's a lot of simplicity but complexity, a lot of different strategies. This game I've seen consistently played in my game group over the last 5 years, I think, since it's come out. It is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. It's a solid game. Even if you don't like Dungeons & Dragons, the game itself is a really great game. So, highly recommend it. Those are my favorite Wizards of the Coast games. Tell me what yours are in the comments below. There's a lot of other games that they've made over the years, different collectible card games, like Netrunner and things like that. But until next time, I'm Tom Vasel, and this has been Best of Wizards of the Coast.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.